Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from today. My name is Eric Lanask with TMC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all and kick off today's event. Today's session is called Don't Miss Out on Connecting with Today's Consumer. So what are we talking about really? What is today's consumer? Well, I think the way to describe them is really mobile first and convenience first. That's how you should be looking at your customers. And frankly, they've got little in common with your customers from 10 years ago, let alone 20 or 30 years ago. They spend so much time on their mobile devices, on their cell phones, on their tablets, on their text messaging, on their social media, and also on various web-based forms of communications alternatives. Really, by and large, they tend to leverage social media as part of their decision-making process. All these things that weren't even available not long ago. Now, for your business, this shift towards communications of convenience is also a major shift in customer experience dynamics, and that traditional strategy of relying solely on inbound calls and toll-free 1-800 numbers into your call centers isn't going to cut it. Instead, this shift in customer behavior requires you to have a parallel shift in not only your engagement strategies, but it also requires some thought around how that's going to intersect with your technology strategy. And that technology strategy today is going to involve much more than just a pure vendor selection. It has to consider different deployment models, cloud, on-premises, hybrid, and which is going to be most suitable for your business based on your objectives, your geography, your network infrastructure, your headcount, and of course, cost. Now, understanding how this new customer dynamic can and should impact your ongoing and future technology strategies is the first step in formulating and implementing a modern customer-centric technology implementation. And that is really what Rebecca Wormleighton and Brian Spencer are with us today to discuss. What do you need to know in order to ensure you don't miss out on connecting with your modern consumer and customer? I'm going to let Rebecca and Brian do a little bit of an introduction on their own roles in a moment, but I will tell you that Rebecca Wormleighton is Director of Product Marketing at Mitel, and Brian Spencer is General Manager of Contact Center at Mitel. Now, before I hand over today's session to Rebecca, just a couple of quick notes. Number one, you all have an interface on your screens, and I encourage you to use that interface to submit questions that you may have of Rebecca and or Brian. We will have a live Q&A at the end of the presentation, but certainly please feel free to send your questions as they come up. Don't want you to forget them. Also, if you need to revisit some of today's content, or if you have colleagues that aren't able to be on the line with us today, contact information as well as details on the on-demand version of today's webinar will be in your inboxes tomorrow. And last, but certainly not least, on behalf of Rebecca and Brian, thank you in advance for taking just a couple of moments to answer a few poll questions that we've inserted into today's webinar that are going to help them tailor comments to you, our audience, today. So having said that, it is my pleasure to hand today's session over to Rebecca Wormleighton from Mitel. Rebecca.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric, and thank you again for everybody taking the time to join us today. We're very passionate about this topic. We really do believe that the world is revolutionizing itself as it relates to customer experience. And we believe that the companies, the organizations that grab a hold of that change, understand it, and address it within their own organizations are going to be the leaders moving into tomorrow. So as Eric mentioned, what I want to do just quickly is just take a moment to introduce ourselves, and then we'll jump right into today's session. So again, my name is Rebecca Wormleighton. I'm with Mitel. I spent much of my career associated with contact centers, customer experience, business analytics as it relates to customer experience. So a breadth of knowledge and time invested in understanding this space and helping to support and make sure we had a portfolio of solutions that are available to adequately support it. Brian, can you take a few moments and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. Brian Spencer, the General Manager of Contact Centers for Mitel. I've got 20 years in the contact center and applications industries for communications, and I've been through 2 or 3 technology transitions and really very interested in the technology transition that's happening today, probably the most profound that's happened in terms of contact centers since I've been in the industry. So glad to talk about it today.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as Eric mentioned, we have inserted a variety of poll questions in today's session, and we've done this specifically so that we can make sure that we can tailor the content and the conversation to those that are in attendance today. So with that being said, we're going to jump into the first poll question. And this is really all about understanding your perspective on cloud within your organization. So really understanding where your head is at. Are you currently considering cloud as an option? Are you researching, you're not considering cloud as an option, or are you currently in the research phase? Are you in the process of moving to cloud? Are you currently a happy cloud customer? Or are you a cloud customer that's currently reevaluating? So if you could just take a moment and help us understand your perspective, it would be much appreciated. We'll just give everybody a couple seconds so that they can go ahead and lodge their point of view. I mean, I think we can all agree that cloud is definitely up and coming, and I think for many people, they're all looking at it from a different perspective. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at the results of today's audience. So as we can see, we've got a lot of people, or not a lot, we've got 3.7% of the audience today doesn't consider cloud as an option, and then we got 33% of the people that are researching it. So not surprising at all. I think it's really important that we understand cloud and where it fits in our perspective so we can make a decision how best to move forward with our organization. We do have a equal number of people that are currently already moving towards cloud, maybe considering where customer experience fits into that, or an existing cloud customer. And then we do have some people that are reevaluating. Always an interesting discussion, because I think, as we'll discuss today, it's not necessarily right for everybody. And it's important, hence today's session, that we really do understand that. So thank you for everybody who completed that. And let's go ahead now and actually jump in. So what are we going to discuss today? There's 4 key areas that we'll be discussing as part of today's session. So we're really going to start with looking at how today's mobile consumers impacting requirements. It's very important that we understand who our customer is today and how they're changing if we're really going to set ourselves up for success and an ability to support that. We'll then take a moment to look at the differences between premise, public, and hybrid clouds to ensure that we're all on the same page as to what it means and how they're different. We'll then look around at some of the common concerns about both premise and cloud so that we can address some of those and hopefully answer some questions. And then we'll look into understanding your business to determine what's actually right for you. So now what I want to do is, once again, is come back to another poll question. Again, we want to really make sure that we're all on the same page. So this first poll question is really looking at how you today use your smartphone, because I think we can agree that majority of the people on this call, I'm going to guess 99.9% of us, have a smartphone. But now let's look at how do we use it. So are you currently, for example, accessing your smartphone via for social media? If you don't, do your kids? You don't have a smartphone really? So let's have a look at where your perspective is. Do you have a smartphone, and how are you today yourselves using it? The results are coming in pretty quickly for that one, so we'll go ahead and take a closer look at this. And not surprisingly, 82% of us are using our smartphones today and even using it for social media. And that's really, as I said, not surprising. There is a few that maybe have a smartphone but aren't using it, and a few that know their kids are doing. And that's a really important point as we go through today's discussion, because our kids today may not be our consumers today, but they will be our consumers eventually. So starting to understand that perspective, their perspective, and how they expect to interact with companies is absolutely key to success. So let's go ahead and get started and look at today's consumer. I think if any of us throughout our day-to-day would take a step back and look at groups of people, whether you're on the bus, at the airport, in McDonald's, wherever you may be, one thing that is absolutely consistent is everybody has a mobile device. Right? And that mobile device is bringing with it a variety of changes, right? Because we've got our mobile device, we are much more intelligent than we were before. And when I say intelligent, what I mean is I've got access to information at my fingertips that I, as a consumer, have never had before, right? Our mobile device is becoming part of us in how we interact and work with our organizations, work with our families and our customers and the like. So it really is a fabric of us as a being. And again, going back to our kids, to the millennials that are coming back, that's even more so. So as we look at who our consumers are, it's really important to understand how they are communicating in today's day and age. So now let's go ahead and look at an additional question, and that is how do you, as an individual, like to interact with with organizations yourself, right? Because I think the reality is today you are a consumer. So if we can all take off our business hat for a moment and put on our consumer hat and look at how we like to interact with organizations, you can quickly begin to see, you're no different than your customers. So if you like to interact with a company via the web or via telephone, you can expect that your customers are probably of the same mindset that you are. So, of course, the same way that you want to be treated as an individual, as a consumer, you want to be able to provide your customers and meet their individual expectations as well. So let's take a look at that. So, of course, there's still the individuals that love the brick and mortar, that want to touch the product, although there's an interesting change in that as well, where a lot of people are going into brick and mortar stores, actually touching and looking at the product, but then going home to buy online. Not surprisingly, a huge percentage, 41%, are interested in the web. Not surprisingly to some of us, telephone is actually rather low. The reality is, at the end of the day, we want to be able to interact with a company, but preferably on our own time, at our own convenience, and often that is not via the telephone. We do have a few email. SMS is still, and social media are still relatively new and a new space, but make no mistake, when you think of the mobile consumer and the millennials and their texting ability, and you think of social media, if they're not on your radar yet, they are going to be on the radar of your consumers in the short term. So this is a little bit of perspective, right? And the key thing here is we are no different than the industry, than globally. The reality is today is customers today expect to be able to interact with an organization in across 3+ channels. They maybe want to go into the store, they want to access via the web, they want to call. They expect that flexibility to do so based on what meets their needs. They're also much more independent. It's estimated that 76% of consumers today prefer self-service. The reality is they don't want to call in and talk to a customer. I would take my daughter as an example. 15-year-old girl asked her to order pizza, and the fact that she had to phone outright refused to have pizza. She was willing not to have it. That's who our consumers are that are coming up into our work world, and we need to understand those. And then you've got 58% of individuals have adapted chat as well, right? So a huge dynamic that we as organizations need to understand if we're going to be successful. The dynamics and the shifts aren't limited to those, right? There's also some general business changes that are having a significant impact on supporting customers and customer experience. A great example is mergers and acquisitions. Companies all over the place are merging with one another. And, of course, the business case associated with that is the faster we can get those companies up and running together, the faster we can merge those customers, take advantage of the new products, the new customers, the new channels, the more successful we'll be. The more FUD we will eliminate from the market, because of course as consumers, the longer they're confused, the more likely they are to depart. The other big impact that we're seeing is, of course, around the Internet of Things, mobile applications. That is a huge opportunity for people to begin, for us to communicate with our customers in non-traditional methods. Right? But make no mistake, if you've got the Internet of Things and we've got data that's coming in about your broken furnace, the faster we can action that data and get a technician out to support that customer's requirement, the happier that customer is going to be. Think of mobile applications, your banking applications. The smoother we can make that interaction, the happier your customers are going to be. And then, of course, there's analytics. Analytics and customer experience are highly aligned, because the more we know about our customers, the quicker we can go from going from a segmentation of many to a segmentation of one. Because I think if we all look at ourselves as individuals, I want to be treated as myself. I don't want to be treated as a huge segmentation of which we don't really know much about. So the world is absolutely changing. Now, what I want to do now is just actually take a moment to look at why that is. What's the challenge? What is our challenge that we're faced with as we go about trying to deal with this new mobile consumer, these growing expectations around customer experience? So to do that, we're going to have our final poll question, and now we want to really start to look at what are your challenges? Right? When you look at what we're trying to accomplish with customer experience today, when we look at how important it is, what's stopping you from maybe advancing upon that mission as quickly as possible? Is it your resources? Do you have budget constraints that you're faced with? Do you have skill issues, agility, response time? Because I think, especially as we look at premise versus cloud, understanding these types of challenges are going to be really key to helping you understand what is your best path to success. So let's go ahead and look at that. So, of course, resources. Resources are always a tremendous challenge. I think for everybody, we always are being asked to do more with less. Of course, no exception. Budget constraints are of course, always a challenge. Skills, not surprisingly, are a challenge. We've got a lot of new technologies coming out there. Agility, I'm actually surprised that's not more of a challenge, but I think that but agility and response time, I think, are closely aligned. Often we can't be as agile as we want and can't respond as quickly as we want because of the complexity associated with our situation. And that brings me to my final slide today before I pass it off to Brian and we start to talk about and understand more cloud versus premise. But the reality is when we take a step back as a business and actually look at our infrastructure from a customer experience strategy perspective, it's been built over many, many years. There's different departments handling it in different ways. They've all got different tools. They're using, they've been built up differently. So all of a sudden, for an organization to be able to respond quickly to some of these changing requirements, it becomes very resource intensive. It's seen, there's a concern about the budget because we've got all this technology that's already there that's invested, but unfortunately isn't going to allow us to do what we need it to do. Right? And I think that's why we're all here today, because I think what we've got to do is look at what do we need to be successful and what's the best path for getting us there. So with that, I will pass it off to Brian to take us through the remainder of today's session.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. So I'd like to transition this conversation from the impact and requirements that are borne on us by the modern mobile consumer and talk about how that affects our decision whether or not to deploy our communications and contact center infrastructure in the cloud, on premises, in a hybrid fashion, or even looking forward to the mobile cloud. And first, I'd like to talk about defining each of these. There are 4 different ways we look at cloud: hybrid, public, private, and mobile. The hybrid cloud is, for many organizations, going to be the quickest line of sight to implement cloud-based technologies. It's about integrating seamlessly cloud-based capabilities and technologies alongside on-premises technologies. So for those of you who already have premises deployed equipment, whether it be your unified communications or voice network system, whether it be your customer relationship manager software, whether it be any other aspect of your IT infrastructure, and you want to start layering in new capabilities and technologies, and you want to do that from the cloud, linking those two together in a seamless fashion will give you what we term at Mitel a hybrid cloud. It's a key migration for existing businesses. We call out medium to large enterprises, many of which have infrastructure that has quite a bit of depreciation and utility left, and it's not yet time to walk away from it. But certainly that's also appropriate for many small businesses that have invested precious dollars in infrastructure that they still have useful life from. They don't want to walk away from it, yet they need new capabilities that maybe aren't available from that premises technology, or maybe they know that over time they want to migrate all of their IT services out to the cloud, and they'd like to start making that decision now, even before they move on from premises technologies. It's great for leveraging those existing investments, and it's also great for organizations that have limited skills and resources in-house and want to essentially outsource some of that infrastructure administration by putting all the infrastructure out in the cloud, where that's somebody else's responsibility, and I'm simply subscribing to the utility born on top of that infrastructure. This can often be what we term the best path to the cloud. The next form of cloud is public cloud. This is probably what most of us think about first and foremost when we use the term cloud as it relates to IT. And that's a pure software as a subscription-based operating model, one set of software and hardware infrastructure serving multiple customers, and we're all sharing the same resources. We're sharing the same infrastructure from a data center perspective. We're sharing the same software. It's tenanted to give us privacy and security between our data, but it's one set of software, one version out in the cloud. This is the primary cloud mode that is being consumed by today's small and mid-sized businesses. It's generally dependent on an over-the-top network availability. Rarely today are these services being coupled with dedicated or private network infrastructure to bring those services into your organization. So you're going to bring the network connectivity of your choice, whether that's just a basic internet connection, or whether that's going to be some sort of dedicated internet connection through a service provider, and then you're going to get the services over the top of that. It tends to be very utilitarian, meaning it's going to serve the broadest possible needs and not be highly customizable because, again, it's going to serve the needs of multiple businesses. Now, there are some organizations who are delivering cloud services that are quite customizable even in a public cloud instance, but many of them will be less customizable and less capable of sophisticated add-ons or tweaks than traditional premises-based IT infrastructure. And it's important to note that in this environment, you're going to be subscribing to the system that is put forth by that vendor. You're not going to have version control. You're not going to have the ability to always be one major release back if that's important to you from verifying stability standpoint. And we'll talk more about that when we get into some of the risks. But again, this is the predominant mode that is being selected by most of today's small and mid-sized businesses. Private cloud, on the other hand, tends to be more heavily adopted by large enterprise and specifically key verticals where privacy and security is not just important, but it's absolutely the mission-critical checkbox. healthcare, financial services, things along those lines where there's not only a severe business risk if there was a violation of the security and privacy, but there may even be regulatory requirements borne on those industries to absolutely have lockdown security on the data that they hold and the data that they transfer back and forth between themselves and other entities and their customers. It is often also chosen by entities that want tighter control over customizations, tighter control over versioning, because a private cloud deployment is essentially a cloud-based set of software and hardware that is a dedicated instance for a single customer. So it's not shared software. It may be shared hardware in the data center, but the software is not shared. It's dedicated on a per customer basis. This is heavily prevalent today in European organizations where data sovereignty rules are dictating that data cannot cross borders, and understanding that my software is being run on this data center in my country and it's dedicated to me and won't move, won't be geolocated somewhere else as maintenance is being performed, can be very important for regulatory compliance. And this often will include some form of network and other cloud components. So many times private cloud will come along with a dedicated network connection to that data center, ensuring quality of service and ensuring maximum availability to those service resources. And then the last form of cloud, and maybe the newest or most modern form of cloud, is the mobile cloud. And this is delivering cloud-based software and IT resources over the mobile network. So using LTE or long-term evolution networks, and even looking forward to 5G networks, which will be trialed soon by some of the major carriers across the world, so that we're now talking about providing network access coupled with the cloud services, but that network access isn't a dedicated form of landline infrastructure. Now we're talking about dedicated access coming through a mobile contract to my mobile users. And this will most align with businesses that are not office bound. They tend to be remote workers, field-based workers, or small businesses that have simply made the decision, we're going to go mobile for our communications infrastructure. We're not going to have an office telephone system. We're going to all have mobile phones because that's how we communicate today, and that's how our customers expect us to communicate with them today. So using the same device as our customers is going to just bring us that much closer to them in our behaviors and our habits. And of course, as you look at your workforce and who it is you want to recruit and the talent you want to bring in, many of the younger members of the workforce who are entering now, that's commonplace. They don't have experience with a landline telephone at home, and asking them to use landline telephones as part of their contact center infrastructure would maybe be a foreign concept to them. And so you're going to be more endearing by using a mobile cloud delivering communications and customer experience technologies over the mobile network. So now the question is, which path do you take? And the good news is there is not one path that you must take. You have choice. You as the business consumer have the power to make the choice of how, if, and when you want to move toward the cloud. And we'll talk about some of the reasons you might want to or not want to move forward with any of these cloud offerings and cloud options. But the bottom line is you could choose to migrate, if you're an existing business, from customer premises equipment to hybrid cloud to public cloud or mobile cloud, or you can shortcut everything and go straight to the mobile cloud if that's what you want. Any form or fashion of moving back and forth between these deployment models is available to you today based on the vendors that are in the space and the technologies they have to offer. I'd like to pause for a moment in describing the options and the deployment models and focus in on a recent customer case study that has moved to the cloud. The San Diego Padres, they were going through a similar evaluation maybe to many of you who are now looking at whether or not cloud delivery models are appropriate for your customer experience center and your overall unified communications. As they assessed their business, they realized their unique challenges included having a vast dispersion of remote offices and remote workers, many of whom are international as they're out scouting in other markets for talent. They've got geographically dispersed sites, so centralized infrastructure was not necessarily going to give them an advantage because they weren't isolated to one single monolithic location. And they realized that by winning the bid for the 2016 All-Star Game, they're going to have a substantial increase in volume requirements in their customer experience center right around the time of the All-Star Game, and then that's going to fall back to normal business levels moving forward. And the ability to be agile in their infrastructure and scale up and scale back, not overspend, but have the resources to meet the requirements and satisfy the customers that would come along with that event, prompted them to decide that they wanted to move with a cloud-based solution. The Padres are one of the leaders in the franchises of Major League Baseball moving into the cloud, so they're being scrutinized and watched closely by Major League Baseball itself as well as the other franchises to see if this works well for them. They absolutely wanted to differentiate themselves in the sporting venue market in the Southern California marketplace by delivering an enhanced and superior customer experience. So they were focused not only on their internal communications, but very focused as a primary discretionary criteria in their decision-making around contact center and overall customer experience. And they needed something that was flexible and scalable that could rapidly adjust to their dynamic business needs. The All-Star Game is just an extreme form of that, where rather than being a local market event, as they are oftentimes, they're now going to be a global market event serving the entire baseball fan community for a singular event midsummer, but that's not going to persist. So they need the ability to rapidly scale up, scale down in terms of the number of users as well as maybe some of the capabilities that they want to leverage during that event. And they needed collaboration that extended beyond their customer experience center out to all aspects of their business users. They want to be able to satisfy customers by reaching the entire organization from the customer experience center, and they want to give the entire organization a single and seamless communications experience. And at the end of the day, by deploying a private cloud-based solution, they were able to meet all of their operational objectives and deliver a cost savings of $60,000 per year compared to their prior premises-based infrastructure. Another case study is a customer of ours called Centronex. Centronex is a business process outsourcer that is rapidly growing their business, but they're doing so with a highly customized customer experience center solution that allows them to deliver customized experiences to each one of their customers' constituents. So as a business process outsourcer, they're providing contact center services on behalf of a range of businesses that are their customers, and they're reaching out to their customer's customer. They need the ability to very tightly define what each of those different customer base experiences will be and personalize it to their customers' requirements. And they made the decision that they could not accomplish this with a pure cloud-based solution. So Centronex has made the conscious decision to go with a premises-based deployment that gave them maximum control and the ability for supreme customization that allowed them to differentiate themselves in the marketplace for business process outsourcing services. At the same time, it's allowed them to scale up their business, leveraging technologies that they had firm control over. They had control over versioning and ensuring that it was optimal and that everyone was trained before upgrading. And it also allowed them to have maximum control over systems integration and doing things like database integration for interactive voice response and CRM or customer relationship management integrations, etc., so that they could serve each of their different customers uniquely. So that brings us to the point of how did each of those organizations make their decisions? The bottom line is each one of these deployment methodologies has benefits and has risks. The cloud has great benefits. It's a shared resource across many business users. That means that advanced technologies that take heavy infrastructure capital can be made accessible and affordable to small and mid-sized business users who could not afford to deploy the full infrastructure themselves and candidly would not use that infrastructure as efficiently because they're simply not large enough to put the demand on the infrastructure that a large business would. A cloud-based deployment, particularly a public cloud-based deployment, uses the shared resource model so that many small business users come together and approximate the usage of a large business and gets the full efficiency out of that capital investment. It's a great way to outsource infrastructure, security, and maintenance if you feel that those are not core competencies or not strategic differentiators for your organization. Going with a cloud-based service provider allows you to minimize your focus of precious on-staff resources against that non-discriminating capability that's just basic utility, not going to help differentiate your business. It allows you to consume the latest innovation as they're available with absolutely no delays. If you're using a public cloud-based subscription to software, when a software version is released, it's going to be released overnight to everybody, and you'll get to take advantage of that. So if you always want to be at the leading edge of the capabilities in the domain of IT we're discussing, public cloud is a good choice for you. It's designed for distributed workforces where there is no advantage to a centralized set of infrastructure, and in fact, that may be a negative because you're now putting a single point of failure in place when you're still distributing out those IT services. So leveraging the cloud when you have a distributed workforce is going to minimize that point of failure and give you an optimized network delivery model. It gives you an operating cost model with bursting provisions. If you have seasonal work or if you have event-driven work like the Padres with the All-Star game, going with a cloud-based model where you have the ability to scale up and scale down on a monthly or quarterly basis as necessary will give you the most efficient operating cost model. And if you're looking for a monthly expense than an upfront capital expense, this is also another reason to move in this direction. Of course, there are many ways to get monthly expense when you're talking on-premises equipment using leases and such, but they're less flexible. And of course, you can piggyback on enterprise reliability. Most cloud deployments are based on the modern, most reliable, most resilient technologies for data center infrastructure, and you're getting to piggyback on top of that. But on-premises deployments clearly still have value. They're proven technologies, they're stable offerings, and they can quickly and reliably meet your needs. Many of you are already operating on premises-based technologies for your contact center, and you are proof points to these statements. It gives you fewer points of failure. It's running inside of your building on your network using your power. You're not reliant on an outsourced provider and then connecting that into your network where you still are reliant on your own infrastructure. When you're bringing in cloud-based services to an office location, both the cloud provider, the connectivity to your office, and your office infrastructure all must be up and running to make that work, and that's just going to introduce more points of failure to you. It gives you financing choice. So where the cloud gives you an operating cost model, if that's desirable to you, great, but if not, you're not going to be able to take advantage of a capital expenditure model or a fixed lease or a managed service. Financing choice comes along with on-premises solutions. You can go with upfront capital, you can go with a lease for predictable monthly payments, or you can go with a managed service that includes some of the skills being brought to bear to operate and administer the infrastructure. It's an internally managed resource, so it's as secure as you want it to be, it's as rapid as you want it to be in terms of taking advantage of new technologies, and it's as stable as you want it to be. You can customize it and integrate it deeply into your company data. It will give you the opportunity to integrate it into your customer relationship database, your order processing database, your transactional database, your healthcare and private information database, because it's within your network and you're not having to expose those externally, which may be a decision you're unwilling to make based on security requirements. And it's going to give you seamless workflows between the contact center and the overall business. If you've got premises-based deployment for your IP telephony or your business communications infrastructure, using a premises-based contact center gives you seamless interoperability between those systems. So let's take a look at the risks for a moment. The system's based on cloud is based on open standards, structures, and interfaces, which is great if you're into standards, but it also means that you have no ability to customize or bring it into truly proprietary systems from an integrations standpoint. It's giving you one level of reliability, and it's all about your connection to the cloud. Now, that may be highly reliable. I don't want to intimate this means unreliable, but that level of reliability is based on that one vendor and what they're providing to you, and including your network connectivity. You're not being able to select the level of reliability you want based on the amount of resource you're willing to invest. It is absolutely more attractive to criminals, people who want to hack in. It's simply scale. More users, more data. There's more value to the criminal activity if they can hack into the network. Limited flexibility. Typically with a public cloud-based deployment, you have one application and one set of customization choices. It may be very customizable if the vendor has made it so, but often, particularly in a dynamic, fast-moving environment, the cloud-based offerings are not going to be as customizable as premises-based deployments. And you have limited interoperability with premises-based data, applications, and devices. And that's probably one of the biggest discriminators to consider as you think about deploying a customer experience solution. Premises-based solutions also have their risks. Hardware obsolescence is your problem, not the vendors. You've paid for that hardware, and when it is no longer meeting the needs of the modern workplace, you're going to be the one on the hook to replace it. A cloud-based solution, the data center infrastructure is up to the vendor to maintain and keep it modern. You've got to have proficient people on staff or pay for it under a managed services contract, so you must be paying directly for the skills necessary to maintain the infrastructure and the applications. I don't want to confuse this with administering and configuring the applications. You'll need to be doing that whether cloud-based or premises-based. But in terms of keeping the lights on, as it were, with the infrastructure, you're going to be paying for that directly. They can be prohibitively expensive for limited use cases and small businesses. As an example, if you're thinking about the advantages that speech analytics could bring to bear to your customer experience solution, you may find it's just simply too expensive because you don't have enough interaction volume to get the true efficiency out of the necessary infrastructure, the minimum barrier of entry. Leveraging cloud, you're not going to have that same upfront minimum barrier of entry because it's a shared resource. It requires a long-term commitment. If you're acquiring premises-based solution, you're probably doing it with a minimum 5-year horizon in mind. You're not doing it with a 2-year horizon in mind. And then lastly, it can grow. Most all systems you'll buy will have capacity for you to add users, but it's not going to shrink. Once you've bought those licenses for the software applications and the necessary hardware, you're probably not able to return them in 6 months when your business needs scaled down because your situation has changed. Hybrid really bridges the extremes. It gives you the ability to leverage premises for pieces, cloud for others, giving you a complete solution. It allows you to migrate segments over time. As an example, maybe you want to move your interactive voice response system out to the cloud first because it's going to be bursting and you want to pay by the minute rather than having infrastructure on-prem, but you want to connect that to your premises-based customer experience center. No problem, you can do that. Keep in mind each piece of the deployment has the benefits and pitfalls of the associated deployment choice. The cloud-based interactive voice response system is not going to be as seamlessly connected to your on-premises database without you having a dedicated secure link between them. The premises-based equipment you're using for your customer experience center is not going to be burstable. It's commonplace. We often think about hybrid as being some sophisticated deployment model, but in reality, it's very common that you might be running premises-based telephony environment for your contact center, and yet you're using a cloud-based CRM solution. So joining two applications, one from the cloud and one from a premises-based deployment, is already fairly common. It's more adaptable to sophisticated IT strategies, meaning you can pick and choose the pieces that need high levels of customized security and high levels of data integration, keep those on premises, and outsource the more utilitarian capabilities to the cloud. And it allows you to really understand what's going to be strategically beneficial to your business and take more control over that. Keep in mind there are challenges to a hybrid approach. Sometimes there will be clunky interop between the cloud and the premises elements, particularly if they are not from a single vendor and there's no unique deep level of integration. Utility services are susceptible to outages, so whatever you've got out in the cloud, you still have the same risks of reliability, whatever they are, whether high or low, you're going to carry those risks. Versioning of the cloud-based solution may disrupt your integrated applications if it's a public-based cloud and version control is not something that you maintain. You're going to have to keep in mind any deep level of integration will need to be inspected at every release of that public cloud infrastructure, and it adds a layer of complexity requiring skilled support on staff through a service agreement. So ultimately, it's important for you as you decide what's most important or what you want as a deployment strategy, what's most important to your business. What are your immediate and near-range contact center needs? What requirements dictate one deployment model over the other for a given piece? Align it with your overall IT strategy. Don't make a customer experience decision in a vacuum. Make sure it's aligned with your overall IT direction and strategies moving forward, and compare it to your business objectives and risk tolerances. Each of these models has pros and cons. It's just a matter of understanding which of those are most important or are most, or to which your company is most sensitive. So with that, I'd like to just give a brief overview of Mitel, and then we'll take some questions. So if you have questions in mind, please add them to the Q&A now. Mitel is unique and it brings together an intersection of cloud, mobility, and enterprise-based solutions. Mitel can help by helping you embrace the modern consumer with customer experience solutions optimized for mobile consumers, including integration with social communications and intelligent self-service, providing you with the ability to seamlessly connect the entire enterprise, putting your customer into the center of your organization, giving not only your contact center, but all of your workers one line of touch, 1 degree of separation at most from your end user customer by linking our unified communications and our customer experience solutions, and business agility by giving you the necessary capabilities to go on premises, in the cloud, or in a hybrid-based deployment to meet the needs based on your strategies. We have the full range of capabilities from simple contact center routing and reporting all the way up through customer journey management and the value delivery chain to support it across small, medium, and large enterprise scale. And if you haven't taken a look at Mitel in a while, it might surprise you to see some of these statistics. Mitel today is a $1.2 billion company operating in over 100 countries with 60 million end user customers, and #1 market share in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and #4 market share overall globally. And we are by far a leader in the cloud for cloud communications capabilities, as well as a leader in on-premises, unified communications, and contact center technologies. From a contact center standpoint, we're recognized as a leader by some of the industry observers. We have number 3 contact center market share for the sub 100 agent market, which tightly aligns with the small to mid-size enterprise. And we have over 600,000 seats deployed. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Brian, thank you very much. Yeah, and as Brian just mentioned, if you do have additional questions, please do get those to us. You know what? Rebecca, let me give Brian a chance to catch his breath and get a drink of water for a moment. Maybe, Rebecca, can you talk a little bit about the difference? You know, we've talked about kind of generally the difference between on-premises and cloud-based alternatives. Specifically when it comes to Mitel's cloud contact center solutions, are there particular differences that folks should be aware of?
Actually, I would say one of the key strengths for Mitel from a cloud and premise perspective is our cloud solution is actually built off of the premise solution. So the capabilities are like to like, which makes it really easy for customers that are looking to, for example, make the transition from cloud to premise. The other, I think, big enhancement or big value that comes with that is, you know, Mitel's cloud-based contact center solution, therefore, is a very advanced solution with all the key bells and whistles that our customers are looking for. And I think that's really important when we start to look at various cloud vendors, is really looking in at the core capabilities and making sure that it's going to have the capabilities that we really need for success. And definitely with Mitel and what it brings to the table, we feel confident that we can support your requirements, whether it be on-premise or in the cloud, with the advanced capabilities.
Excellent. Thanks, Rebecca. So for folks who are considering or implementing a hybrid cloud solution, what hardware are they going to require on premises in order to make that a reality?
So the hardware necessary to make that a reality, if they're going with a pure cloud-based solution, you're really talking about devices for access to that cloud solution, whether that's a traditional desktop PC for your workers and a traditional telephone that connects to that cloud-based service, or whether it's a more modern set of environment like tablets and soft phones, or tablets and smartphones with a native app on top of it connecting to that cloud solution. If you're talking about a hybrid solution, then it's really all your choice. It's which pieces you want to have on premises, and you're going to need the hardware to support that. As an example, if you want your interactive voice response solution on premises, you can connect it to your private data. You're going to need the hardware infrastructure to support that interactive voice response solution, whether that's a dedicated server or a data center with virtualized software running on top of it.
Brian, thank you. For folks who may be interested in a demo of the cloud product, how would they go about that?
Sure, I can. This is Rebecca. I can jump in and take that one. If you are looking for a demo of our cloud product, I would encourage you to reach out to us directly, and we can make the appropriate arrangements and get you set up based on your location and your requirements, and give you whatever specifically you need to meet your needs.
Excellent, thank you, Rebecca. And for anyone interested in a demo, we will again a reminder: you'll get contact information in a follow-up email after today's event. So again, as Rebecca said, reach out to them directly. Are there latest enhancements that our audience should know about that may help them in making their decisions as they consider whether they should move to the cloud or not?
Sure. Well, I'd say one of those, and maybe it's not an enhancement, so maybe this is not directly answering that aspect of the question, but as Rebecca articulated at the beginning of the presentation, the importance of an excellently run customer experience center has only grown of late. Customers are more demanding than they used to be, and the number of access points they expect has gone up. And considering that and looking for the most reliable and highly available solution is really important. So that's a change that has taken place that I would say would drive me to strongly consider, if I'm a small business, going cloud to get the more highly available and more sophisticated digital media tools. If I am a mid-sized business that has more resources, I may be considering going with on-premises where I control that reliability and highly available solution. The other thing I would say is that more and more capabilities have been moved to the cloud, and more of the user experiences have been moved to native mobile or browser-delivered experience workspaces. So that makes cloud technologies maybe more accessible than they used to be, and I would say that's a primary enhancement of late.
Thank you, Brian. What about, businesses without a history of using cloud solutions, are they going to require any sort of extensive training or downtime as they make that migration in terms of either the user base or management?
Well, certainly anytime you change out your infrastructure, you're looking at some amount of training. I'd say that most of today's technologies, whether consumed on premises or from the cloud, are somewhat intuitive to minimize that training requirement. But as far as the downtime, I think the risk in moving everything from an on-premises model to a cloud-based delivered model overnight is exactly that. It's not a graceful migration. It is an overnight cut, and you take the risks that everything's set up and perfectly ready to go on day one, as opposed to a progressive migration where you move a certain community of users over and then follow that with further communities until the migration is done, which is that's one of the advantages to going to a hybrid-based solution as a transitionary point to reach a fully cloud-based delivery model, if that's the end game you're seeking.
Brian, thank you. Can we go back, Brian, to when you were talking about the San Diego Padres case study? Can you review a little bit about the configuration for that implementation and how that actually was handled?
Sure, be happy to. We went through a diligent discovery process with them, and to their credit, they had analyzed their business requirements in advance to better understand and guide the vendors that they were interviewing to the proper solution. And at the end of the day, the configuration that was most important to them was a completely cloud-based but private cloud-based deployment model that gave them seamless connectivity for all of their business users, including their large number of remote workers, as operating on one single system with the ability to seamlessly communicate using presence technologies, instant messaging, voice conversations, conference calling, and to have the contact center as an integrated element of that. So they looked strongly at the contact center needs that they had. They wanted to deliver a prioritized experience to their top tier ticket holders, those that were buying premium seats. They wanted to have a VIP experience for their suite holders, be able to give them a better, higher level of access and customer engagement when they needed support. And they wanted to have it deeply integrated with their customer relationship management software so that they could instantly deliver the personalized experience that an entertainment venue consumer has. Further to that, they needed the ability to handle, again, bursting needs, and I use the All-Star Game as an example, but they also have other events that drive bursting activities, like very popular concerts. When the most popular band comes through and plays at Petco Park, Padres contact center is who will answer that for ticket sales. And so they'll get a strong demand for ticket sales when they first announce these shows. So those were the key requirements that drove their configuration. In the end, they went with a private cloud solution for their UC, or Unified Communications, their contact center, and they went with digital media capabilities in their contact center so that they could support their ticket holders, their consumers, in the way they want to be reached today, which is not just voice. Voice is important, but includes voice, email, web chat, and SMS capabilities. So ultimately, those were the configuration requirements, and then, of course, the integration to their CRM system.
Great, Brian. Thank you very much. That actually does take us to the end of the time that we have for live Q&A. I know there's still a number of questions that we weren't able to get to today. I assure you all of the questions today have been archived, and Rebecca and Brian and the rest of the team over at Mitel will answer any of those additional questions and any new questions that you have that you want to reach out with offline following today's event. Again, now look for that contact information and details on the on-demand version after today's event. I want to thank Rebecca Wormleighton and Brian Spencer from Mitel for a fantastic presentation today, and of course the folks over at Mitel for sponsoring today's event. None of it would be possible without you, our audience, so thank you for taking some time out of your busy days to join us. I hope it was worth your while, and have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from today. My name is Eric Lanask with TMC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all and kick off today's event. Today's session is called Don't Miss Out on Connecting with Today's Consumer. So what are we talking about really? What is today's consumer? Well, I think the way to describe them is really mobile first and convenience first. That's